Hello, so today as a little fun video, we're going to be going through all the augments and just quickly ranking them. I'm going to try and go through these pretty fast. It's going to be mostly for fun. I'm not going to be talking about every use case of every augment, but a couple of you were asking me for augment tier list. I don't really agree with the idea of an augment tier list. I think you should always pick an augment that best fits your board, and a lot of these are very situationally proper. However, I think it's nice to just do this a little bit for fun because I was looking for a for fun video to do for the weekend for both today and tomorrow. So I'm going to rank all the silvers relative to each other, then all the gold ones relative to each other, and then all the prismatic ones relative to each other. So, without much further ado, we'll get started, but before we do that, please make sure to like and subscribe if you like my content. I usually do guides that are much more informative and a lot better than a video like this if you're trying to learn, and also VOD reviews, which are extremely, in my opinion, some of the best resources that you can have in order to accurately try and evaluate what you're doing turn by turn. So I do that type of content, primarily. Also, I have my art store that recently opened, so if anybody's looking for some stuff to hang up on their walls, you can check it out. And there's also the Jinx and Yukio pictures Jinx and Caitlyn Yukio style pictures that I've done, so you can check those out, framed and unframed, available. More stuff will be available in the future as well. So let's start with silvers. So backup, let me just double check. Backup is what I'm thinking it is. Oh, this is the attack speed one. Okay. Backup, I think, is I usually don't for a silver. I don't often take it. I think it's somewhere between B and A. I think it's not particularly broken. It's kind of small in the attack speed that it gives you, and it doesn't work with some of the comps. That's the main thing. So I'll put it in B, and then maybe we'll move it around later. Band of Thieves, I think, is A tier. Just a Thieves Glove is just a good resource. It's quite powerful for a silver augment just to get a Thieves Gloves. I believe in it. Beggars, D tier. If you're playing for Beggars to try and get a bailout augment, this is often one of the worst ideas you can have in the game, in my opinion. So I almost never click this, and I don't think anybody should. Blade Dance, I think, is average. It just depends on your spot. That's the hero augment for Irelia. Blistering Strikes, I think, is also B tier. Blistering Strikes might also be C tier. It does depend. The problem with Blistering Strikes is not... Oh, they highlight when you hover. That's so cool. The problem with Blistering Strikes is that it's your team's attacks burn. So this does anti-heal for free, which is nice. But the problem is... the burn and then the healing, they reduce the healing by 33%. So it does anti-heal for free. The problem is it's the attacks. So there's very few units that are able to have backline access. And a lot of times when you're making anti-heal, you want to have a unit that has access to deeper than just the ones that you're auto-attacking. So it's a little bit awkward. So it's kind of average. It's B tier. If you need it, you can take it. It's it's equivalent of Sunfire, but it's not as good as putting a Morello on a unit with backline access or a red buff on a unit with backline access. Branching out, A tier. For a silver, you just get a free emblem and a reforger, so you get 2 cracks at finding something that can work pretty well with your opener on your board. Bulky Buddies, I like Bulky Buddies as S tier. I think it's one of the best combats. I almost always take it compared to the other combats. Just extra frontline, extra HP, as well as health shield on your units. Called Shots, I think it's a sometimes food. I usually put it on C tier. If you have a board where you know that you're going to win streak, it makes sense just to start your win streak early. You're just making a little bit more gold every round, but very rarely does it actually pay out. And your win streak doesn't last that long, so compared to other gold augments, gold generation, I don't really like it. Caretakers, I think, is a solid A tier. 2 costs are pretty strong right now. There's a lot of them that you can just hit and just instant win as well. So often you can take it. If not, you can just use it as a little bit of extra econ. Climb the Ladder, I think, is also depending on your comp, it may or may not work. So it's similar to backup. If you have a comp where you're playing all of the same units, then it works really nicely. If not, it's not that great. Combat Medic, B tier as well. You need the spot for it to play it. Component Buffet, I think Component Buffet is actually A tier, just because I don't know, I've been liking this augment a lot more recently, just because I feel like the meta right now is very reroll focused. So while Component Buffet isn't that great, it does ensure that you have perfect items, and a lot of the times you're either contesting similar forecasts or you're playing a reroll, and the item quality matters a lot. So I'm a big fan of just having Component Buffet and playing around it, but it is somewhat situational, so it's somewhere between here and here. It's not Giga broken or anything, but it's alright. Corrosion, I don't think Corrosion is that good. I usually put it here. I think it's just too slow, the amount of armor and magic that it resists, so it's a worse than Blistering Strikes in my opinion. I would try not to take it unless I really have to. Crafting. This is really situational. I'll put it in B tier. It has the potential to be A and even S tier, depending on how many augments or how many items you have in the game that you're crafting. But I put in B tier. Delayed start, S tier for sure. I think if you see delayed start, you get this on 2-1. It's almost always like an instant win streak. You just get so much value for it. The main thing is that it sells your board and bench. So you sell all your units. It bails you out, so it just like takes everything, gives you maximum gold that you can get from starting of the game, and then it gives you a bunch of 2-star 1-cost champions, which is just way stronger than most other units on the board. If you high roll it with your items, it's a guaranteed 5 streak. A lot of times it's a guaranteed top 4, just putting you in a really strong spot, and then you can often play around 1 or 2 of the units that you get from the delayed start. Diversified portfolio I think is pretty good. The one that's better is Diversified Plus, but this one's just like kind of like average. I would say it's like somewhere between B and C, sure. Oh, Diversified Portfolio Plus. This one's a lot better. So Diversified Portfolio, you get 2 gold for every 4 non-traits active. Wait, is this just the same one? I forget which one got buffed. One of these got buffed and it was better. Whichever one is the buffed version is A tier. Because you just get a lot of rolls. Maybe it's just the gold one. Dumbify. Dumbify's A tier. I think Dumbify, the only thing that limits you is if you're already committed to a comp and you cannot build around it, but Dumbify just gives you a lot for what it is. If you have the gold to maybe it's just situational, so I'll put in B. It's a little bit situational, I'll put in B. If you have a spot to take Dumbify, you should almost always take it, because it's just so much value and just a dummy for this silver augment. But if you don't have a good spot for it, it can grief your game really hard. That's why it's in B tier. Eye for an Eye I think is A tier. It just gives you a lot of components for what it is. I think it's pretty good, right? You can get 4 components for 1 silver augment. It just takes a little bit of time to cash out, but I think it's in that A tier range. Eye for an Eye Plus I think is a little bit better. Oh no, Eye for Eye Plus I don't know if it's any better. We'll put them together. I'm not sure what the difference is. Usually I take it if I just need components. Find Your Center. I usually don't take this augment. I put it in C tier. I feel like there's very few boards that it actually works with. Like maybe like Enforcers, or if you're trying to like play a hero augment into it. But very often I'm not like looking at this and thinking to myself, yep, this is great. It's like you need to be playing a frontline melee comp, and there's not many of those right now. Find Vintage. I don't even think this exists in the set right now. So, like, I don't know what to do with it. I'll put it at the bottom. I haven't seen it in forever, so I don't think it's existing. Fire Sale, I think, is a lot of gold. I'll put in A tier. Glass Cannon, I think, is great. I put in A tier as well. I think out of the combat augments is one of the better ones. It works really well with Sorks as well as Visionaries and a lot of other things. Damage amp is a little bit harder to come by than AP and attack speed and other things. In general, right? So, I find that with Glass Cannon, it just works out really nicely. Good for something. I think this has been B tier, really good gold generation. Nothing super crazy. Health is Wealth, I think, is a little bit better. I like it in A tier. It just gives Omnivamp as well as the gold at one point. So it's kind of like helps you in 2 different ways. So I liken it to be A tier. Help is on the way. I think this is A tier. Just a support item for a silver augment is powerful. You just have to sack your early game, so it works out nicely. Hope this works. Okay, this one's definitely removed. Iron Assets, gain a component anvil and 4 gold. The 4 gold actually helps you a lot to like set yourself up for your mid and late game. I would put it in B tier. This is like, you can take it and it's like a reliable, like, hey, you take this, you have some gold, you work with it, it's fine. Item Collector, I think is also, it's either A or B. I think it's B tier. I feel like it's just not that many stats at its silver level. So, you know, you take it if you need power, but like I said, it's a little bit more situational. It's not something that's like you can take it and be like, oh yeah, this is pretty good. Item Grab Bag, I think it's like same as like B tier. Sometimes I just take it to get an item, but I think it's probably like C tier, honestly, because the item is random and sometimes it just doesn't work. But basically this is like 2 components for a silver, so it's not the greatest thing. Kingslayer, I don't like Kingslayer. I think some people are trying to make it work. It is a lot of gold, but you have to sack your early game. So I'm going to put in B tier. I think it's C tier, but I understand that it could be broken, so I'll put in B tier. But the problem is sometimes this backfires really badly, and then you just absolutely wreck your game. So I wouldn't necessarily take it all the time. I would be careful about when I take it. But basically you have to sack your early game, make sure that you lose a lot of HP, then you just generate a bunch of gold in your mid game. It works really well with reroll lines that you're trying to spike on stage 3. So you sack your entire opener, maximize your econ, then you stabilize your board in the middle of the game, you generate a bunch of gold, hit all your units, win out for free. Like that's like the idea with Kingslayer. It's like a very reroll heavy thing. I haven't tested it personally. It might be here, it might also be here. If you're looking at this to figure it out, I would only take it if I'm playing a reroll and I know that I'm sacking all of stage 2 to make sure I have component prior on carousel. Do you know what I mean? Late game, C tier. You cannot take this and say to yourself that I'm going, like, this is very situational, but it's often C tier. You don't know if you can go level 9 until you have your level 8 roll down. That's basically it. You cannot when this is offered in the game, it is too early for you to tell whether or not you're going to be able to fast 9. And if you dedicate yourself to a fast 9 by taking this augment, there is a good chance that you are just going to lose. You're just down a silver augment and you might not even make it to level 9. Who knows? Latent Forge I think is A tier. I think just it's A tier or B tier. I think Help is on the Way is a little bit better because the support items I like more than the Ornn artifacts. But Help is on the Way. You know, I think Latent Forge is up there. Let's put it at the same as this. It's like, if you're playing around a board that spikes around Ornn artifacts, it works really well. And a lot of times, if you don't have a good opener, you can just take this and know that you'll spike later and then play around the Ornn artifact before you do your roll down. I feel like it's a little bit slow, but I definitely think it's stronger than some of the options in B, or a little bit easier to take. Lineup, I actually kind of like lineup in certain comps. I'm going to put in B tier. I don't think it's super necessary a lot of the time, but it is quite strong with something like Scrap, something where you're playing a lot of frontline units in a row, because it just works really nicely. But it doesn't work with all comps, because like obviously if you're playing like, you know, for example, Sorks or Visionaries, you're not going to get any lineup values, so you can only really take this if you're playing like a frontline heavy comp where everybody's just in the front row. Lone Hero is out of the game. Lunch Money is very situational. I'm going to put in B tier. If you're strong and you know that you're the strongest in the lobby, this gives you so much gold and it can cap out your board very high. It's like a win streak thing. Mad Chemist, I don't believe in this augment. I'm willing to put it in C tier. I think all the other hero augments are good. I think this one, even if you have a good Singe spot, I would be weary about taking it. Of course, like I said before, everything on this list has the potential to be something that makes you go first. I'm going to repeat it again. Do I have the text still? I might still have the text. Yeah, we're going to flash this while I speak. I want to make it very, very clear. Some of y'all don't understand when I speak my words, and I get a lot of like comments that are really annoying sometimes. I'm going to be 100% transparent. A lot of these augments, I understand. Every single one of these augments you can take in a certain spot, and it could be the game-winning situation. That is TFT. You can see Beggars Execute Choosers, which I say is trash. You can take it and instantly win out the game because of it, because you hit the perfect artifact, you hit the perfect augment afterwards, and it works out 100% of the time, and it's great. You can take Late Game Specialist, you can take Mad Chemist, you can take Find Your Center and be like, oh, I had Find Your Center, reroll Nocturne in the middle with like range and what else. I don't care, right? I understand that there's situations where all of these are going to be the best augment that you can possibly hit. I'm just saying, relative to these, like, I would not click Mad Chemist very often unless I have 100 Singes and like the best items for Singed. I think this does not cap very high, and I think it is very, very awkward when you're playing around this dude. The only time I would consider playing Mad Chemist is if the Academy items are on Archangels, or the Academy item is an item that I can put on the Mad Chemist, because then it actually synergizes really well and you have good item economy. Other than that, you're dedicating all your AP items to this little chuckle fuck, and then the best of your units don't do damage, and he falls off really badly late game. Even with the buffs, straight up. Mana Flow, A tier. I think this is broken. Just 2 extra mana per attack, works with almost every AP caster line. Very strong. The only time it doesn't work is if you're not playing your front line, but the benefits to its back line are so powerful that I think it deserves A tier. Mentorship, A tier. For what it is, it just gives a lot of value for both frontline as well as dealing with stuff. It might also be S tier mentorship. I think mentorship is S tier. Like if you have a spot that you can take it, that you know that you're playing different cost of units, I would consider it S tier. Misconnections, I think that's like C tier. I usually don't take it unless I'm really desperate for econ. One for All I think is A tier. It's a little bit more situational. It could be S tier, but I think it's like A tier. It's just like, you know, you take it if you're playing 1-cost reroll or Renata or something else like that, right? If you're playing a lot of 1-cost on your board, you're playing a low-cost reroll, it's really broken. If not, otherwise, it's pretty useless. 125, I think this is more like a bailout thing. I put in like C tier, you're just taking it for the bailout a lot of the time. 1-2s, 3s, I put in B tier. This is really good to set up your econ early. If you see this instantly, you can just buy it to sell the units, and then that puts you in a really good spot financially for the rest of the game, and you're often really rich. So use it as like an early econ augment, or you can play around the units that you get if they're really strong. Over Encumbered, I think that Over Encumbered is A tier. I think it gives you a lot of value for what it is. 3 item components for a silver, and you only have to sack a stage, which a lot of times you're sacking stage 2 anyways. Really good into reroll, really good into heavy item what's it called, boards, excuse me. Pandoras, I don't like Pandoras. I'll put in B tier. Pandoras could be this. Pandoras could be this. Yes, I understand. Every time I take Pandoras, I don't hit the units. It's really, really slow. It's pretty bad. It works really nicely in certain comps, right? If you're playing a comp where you need a certain 5 cost in order to spike, Pandoras can help you with that because you find an early 5 cost. You can reroll into the one that you want. If you're spiking around particular 4 cost is really good, namely you're using it for rerolls. I find that if you're not playing a 1 cost reroll or a 2 cost reroll, this augment is useless. Namely, if you're not playing a 1 cost reroll, it is way too slow. I find that with 2 costs, it's very RNG if you actually hit everything. A lot of times you'll have Pandoras and you'll wait like 10 turns and you won't hit your 3-star 2 costs. Then you have to roll for them anyways. And then by the time you roll for them, you're just down an augment, you're down a bunch of gold, and Pandoras did effectively nothing for your entire game. That happens a lot, and it's not even that uncommon. So I would recommend, like, you know, being careful. But of course, it is very broken. You could put in A tier, you could put in S tier. It does depend on when you get it and what your spot is. So that's why it's in B tier, similar to the other ones. Pandora's items is a similar experience. I think Pandora's I usually try and avoid, but I'll just put in B tier. It does give you a component, and it randomizes your item, so it could help you out a lot. And especially for a silver, you're not as punished for taking it. Higher levels of Pandoras feel a lot worse because they give you comparatively a lot less. Like, you know, you're comparing like one component with perfect components versus like, you know, something else. But I would rather just take something like component buffet, right? You get a random component and it's a lot faster than Pandora's because every item that you get or every component you get turns into an anvil, as opposed to like waiting for this to roll into your items. It's a little bit more awkward. Patience is a virtue. Is this still in the game? I don't know if it's still in the game. I'll put in B tier. I think it rolls pretty nicely. Maybe it's not B tier. Sorry, I'll put this in C tier. I think that a lot of times you're buying 1 cost. There's a lot of them that are really important to hold on to. And your mid-game tempo is really important. It's really hard to take this unless you know that you're like fully upgraded, because you're not going to get that many rerolls with it. I find that it's hard to stabilize in your early game, so I would rather just take some of the other options. And I think you come out to the same difference by saving HP, playing a stronger board sometimes. Placebo, I'm going to put placebos in B tier. Placebo gives a lot of gold. That's the main thing that it does. So this is just to set up your early econ. So it's very average. A lot of times if you're just like looking for something to take, you just take placebo because it gives you the gold. Power up, I think power up is B tier. Or maybe it's like A tier. I don't know. I think it's like A tier. It depends on what you hit with your power up. The prismatics are really RNG, but I think it's pretty strong. I kind of lean towards taking it because I think that you spike a lot harder. It's just like, it's very RNG. So like if you get a prismatic ender, it's good to get a prismatic. But if you're trading a silver, like if you're trading 2 silvers for a gold and your gold isn't a good combat that works with your team, it's pretty mid. That's why it's in B tier, right? It's really good when it rolls into a prismatic and you're just up a prismatic combat augment. You feel really powerful with it. But if it rolls into a gold and you're up like a gold augment versus being down a silver and somebody just has 2 silvers, it's like, it's like, is it really that big of a spike? Not really. Pumping up, everybody likes attack speed. I'm willing to put it here or even here. I think that, you know what, let's put pumping up in S tier. Also, let's put branching out in S tier. I think both of these deserve to be S tier, right? Emblems are really strong right now, especially with 6 costs. So branching out, playing around an emblem is extremely strong. And I think that, you know, with this, you have a lot of win conditions, so much more than any other silver, right? Of all the silvers, this is like your highest win condition, and the low rolls aren't even that bad, so long as you don't hit something absolutely abysmal, but you get a reforger. So often it's always worth it to just take it, because even if you get something that's like absolutely like completely dog shit, you can often reforge it and find something slightly better or something around better. So I'm down for that. And then pumping up, I think, should be up there as well. Recon Bob, I'm going to put it in like B tier. It can win you the game, but it also is pretty bad a lot of the time. Because like, you know, it depends on what upgrades you have. If you find like an early 4 cost and you just get a 5 cost for free, then you can play your whole game around that 5 cost, and it comes early enough that you can structure your board such a way. So B tier. But other than that, like, it's very situational, but it's not as situationally annoying as some of these ones. Right? These ones, like, you know, besides like 125 and patient versions, some of these feel like bailouts. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Let me put it back. Some of them feel like bailouts. This one's kind of bad. This one's kind of hoping for stuff to be good. This one's kind of mid compared to other augments. Just doesn't give you a lot, but you just take it for the sake of taking it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't like these ones that much. Reroll transfer. For everyone you use one. This is like, I think this is D tier. You're just hoping to roll into something better. It kind of sucks. Restart mission, I think, is A tier. If you're able to take restart mission, it just gives you so much resource. Often people take restart mission, then you just win out on stage 2. Or sorry, stage 3. So it's just really good. Rigged shop. Your next shop and every 4 shops will contain... Yeah, this is pretty good if you're going for reroll. So I don't think it's A tier, but I think it's B tier. But that's mostly because there's not like a really solid 3-cost reroll that you want to play. Rig Shop is pretty good if you're trying to play a mixed 3-cost, 2-cost reroll type of thing, because you get a lot of 3 costs in your shops with Rig Shop. The problem with Rig Shop though is that if you take it trying to play around like 4 costs and 5 costs, you're kind of griefing your shops late game a lot of the time, because like every 4 shops you're just gonna see a bunch of 3 costs instead of having like, you know, when your shop odds are better than seeing 3 costs, then seeing a bunch of 3 costs is often really grief. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Well, let's say you're level 10 and you're trying to roll for Victor, and every 4 or like Warwick, or like, you know, you're level 10, you're trying to roll for like, you know, 5 cost upgrades and 4 cost upgrades. Then every 4 shops you see a goddamn list of 3 costs. It's like at that point of the game you're like, this is shit, right? So that's what I mean. It's like, it's really good if you're low level trying to spike your board around like upgraded 3 costs and maybe reroll them. But if you're like, as soon as you get to a point where you're looking for the higher cost units, then it turns into a grief augment. That's why it's B tier, because or to me it's B tier. It's like, I only take it if like, you know, I really know that I'm playing around a 3 cost reroll. Like let's say I'm playing Smeech, right? If I'm playing around Smeech and or Loris TF, right? If I'm playing Loris TF, then it makes sense because I go like on level 2 I can start farming some, right? On level 7, sorry, on level 6 I can start farming stuff, on level 7 I can start farming stuff, and on level 7 I guarantee like a complete shop of them all, so it makes it a lot easier to hit. Like that type of comp is what I would want more towards playing it. And then often if you can tempo, if you're level 8, you know, you still can cap out around them, right? I wouldn't take this with like Sorks, for example, because you're just losing so many shops, and like Swain 3 isn't as good with Rig Shop as finding a LeBlanc in a lot of cases. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Hopefully that makes sense. Risky moves, I don't know, it depends on this depends entirely on the encounter. I'll put in B tier. Actually no, it's like B tier, sure. Rolling for days, this one's just like an average, you just take it. It's like a good amount of gold. Basically it's like 22 gold, right? 11 free shop rerolls. So even if you're not playing reroll, sometimes you just take it because it's like, okay, you know, this will help me hit my 4 costs, this will help me hit my rest of my board. You know, it's basically like 22 gold of econ just in the form of rolling, so that's fine. Silver Spoon, I think Silver Spoon's B tier. Just, you know, you take it, try and level up. Spoils of War, I think is like, it's very situational. So I think that it's like, yeah, Spoils of War 1 has such a low chance. Honestly, it's somewhere between C and B, but I'll just put in B tier. Superstars, yeah, it's good if you're playing 1 cost. It's very strong. Support mining, I think is I think this is S tier. Both these support mining stuff. Getting a support item and getting a anvil, like these are just so strong, right? If you're in a spot where you're not trying to win streak early, it basically gives you a target dummy. So you get a target dummy, which helps your board during the time of having it, and then afterwards it gives you the support item, so you even spike later. It's not like a target dummy that just exists to be a target dummy. It gives you so much value, right? It's not like something like, you know, like Latent Forge, you get to pick your item, and Help is on the way, you get to pick your item, yes. But the support items, there's very few that are like hard misses, but you get a lot more value off of it in your mid game because you get to play around a target dummy, so that's pretty cool. Survivor, I think is bait, C tier, maybe even D tier. We'll put in C tier. Table Scraps I think is really good. I'm down to put in B tier. I'm not sure how strong it is because it only came back recently. Team Building is kind of like a bailout, but for a silver it's not that bad, so I think it's like B tier. Teaming Up, 2 random tier 3, 1 component and 2 random tier 3 champions. I don't know, I think it's like in B tier. You just take it, you get a component, you try and like, you get a component and 6 gold. A lot of times it's like good enough. Titanic Titan, I don't like this one. I'm gonna put in C tier. I think it's kind of shit. Jungle on Free, however, the equivalent I think is like B tier. I don't think it matters all that much. Sometimes it's A tier, but it's like somewhere in the average. And then Trolling I think is B tier, right? You can only really, actually I think Trolling is the better of them, so I'm gonna put in A tier. And then these ones aren't in the game anymore. All right, so those are all the silvers. Obviously I did them really fast. Stuff can move around between the levels. The difference between silvers is very little, by the way. I want that to be very clear. The difference between S and C aren't that big. So a lot of these, like, you know, you might see like delayed start, but then you might also see something like find your center. And if you're playing a comp where you're playing like a frontline melee thing, like, you know, find your center with like Vander hero augment. Obviously this is going to be broken and you have to click it instantly, and it's going to help you out the most out of anything. But what I'm saying is, unless you have some sort of giga hero 1v9, like it does very little. Like the damage amp is pretty useless. The 50% max health is good for a tank, but you don't make use of the damage amp, so then it just feels underpowered. Like, this is good if you're playing Enforcers and you have a Vi, maybe. Like, do you get what I'm trying to say? It's very situational. I wouldn't necessarily build it to play around it. These ones are a lot more open and very strong. Alright. Clear. Gold augments. Oh my god, there's so many. Alright, we're gonna have to go really fast with these ones, because this video is gonna take, like, hours. Golden Find, I think this one's pretty shit. C tier, it just takes too long. Magic Roll, I think is B tier. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Academic Research, I think is B tier. I don't know how strong this is. It just doesn't feel that good whenever I take it. Academy Crest, I think is A tier. If you're playing around Academy, it spikes your board really high. Adrenaline Burst, I think if you're playing around Nocturne and Akali is pretty good. Right? Because it starts you on combat to ramp up really fast. I don't know. I'm kind of down for it. Aerial Warfare, I think, is A tier. All That Shimmers, I think these are like S tier. A lot of times you look at it and you just take it because it gives you a good item. Right? Gold Collector is a good item. Ambusher Crest, A tier. Another Anomaly, I think, is really fucking bad. I would often not take it. If you don't believe Another Anomaly is pretty bad, look at the stats on the Anomaly item. It's pretty fucking shit. It averages like a 5. But besides the point, it's just really hard because it locks you into like having to roll for specific anomalies. This one's gone. Artillerist Emblem, I think, is like B tier. It's very situational. You almost never take it. Atomic Crest, same thing. Maybe we can move all of these down one, like average. I think maybe it's something like this. I'm down for something like this because these are all situational, right? There's nothing super broken here. I think it's more like, yeah, let's do it like that, and then we'll rearrange after if we have to. Bad Luck Protection, I think, is pretty strong sometimes, but it's very situational. I would put it in B tier. But this, I don't know, it's like B tier or C tier. This only works with AD comps, right? So because it converts critical strike chance to AD, so it's not that great. Battle Scars, I haven't seen this shit in forever. Does this still exist? I don't even know. I'll put in C tier. I don't know if it exists. I haven't seen it in forever. Big Grab Bag is like the epitome of B tier. Black Rose Emblem, I think, is A tier. It's just really strong. Blazing Soul, I think, is A tier. It's just extremely strong with AP comps. BRB, I think, is really strong because you get 2 completed item anvils. I'll put in A tier. I almost always take it if I'm lose streaking early. Bronze for Life has really strong win conditions, but it's very situational, so I'll put in B tier. There's certain boards that it caps out really high. I feel like if you don't have a dedicated Bronze for Life board, this feels very middling every time I take it, so I'm really concerned about it. Bruiser Emblem, I usually never really want to ever take this, so I'll put in C tier. Brutal Revenge, I think, is B tier because it takes like a good spot to take. Built Diff, I think, is really strong. I'm putting in A tier. Bulky Buddies, I think, is S tier. It's just the HP that it gives is just ridiculous. I think it's really strong. Caretakers, I think, is, I don't know. I think Caretakers, I put Caretakers in B tier. Like, if you think about Caretakers, it's like BRB, but like with 4, like it's like the same resources at BRB, except like you have a little bit more flexibility, but you only cash on level 8. Like, I don't know. I think it's not as good. Category 5, I don't think is that good. I put in C tier. There's very few boards that work with this. Like, Ezreal 3 carry is pretty good. Twitch sometimes is pretty good. But generally speaking, there's not like a good Runans holder because a lot of those other units want other items to play. The tech was when Ezreal was bugged, people would just take Category 5 and force Ezreal because Ezreal did more damage with his ult with like Runans. So if Academy item was Runans and you see Category 5, you take it and it was bugged Ezreal. I don't know how it is after they fixed the bug, but you know, it is what it is. Kemba doesn't exist. Clear Mind, I think Clear Mind is B tier. It's just like, you know, you're kind of forcing yourself to full open and make a weak board, so the trade-off isn't that great. Climb the Ladder, I think, is situationally really good, so we'll put in B tier. It really works with some comps. Clockwork Accelerator, I think, is also B tier. It works really well with certain comps if you have a lot of frontline. Cloning Facility, I think, is A tier. I think that just getting an extra unit on your board is extremely powerful. And a lot of times, like, you might sleep on this, but it works with pretty much almost any board. You just get, like, so much value off of it that a lot of times you should consider taking it. Cluttered Mind, I think, is a little bit better than Clear Mind, but I would still put in B tier. It's just like a generic augment that gives you econ, but I wouldn't necessarily... Like, it's harder to play around because, you know... maybe it's A tier. Let's put in A tier for fun. All right, this is a for fun pick. I think it's around the same as here, but let's put in A tier. Clutter Mind, the reason that's better in my opinion than Clear Mind is because Clear Mind you kind of have to full open because you can't upgrade your units, or you have to push levels, you have to play very aggressively. It's harder to play around. Cluttered Mind, as long as you're not like claustrophobic, it's pretty good. Like you just put all the units on your bench and then you're generating basically 3 gold per round. It's not that bad. It also allows you to hold on to the units, especially if you're playing reroll or something like that. It gives you more opportunities than something like Clear Mind. So I think of the econ augments, if I see the 2 of them, like obviously you just have to take one if you need econ on 2-1. I think Clutter is a little bit better. Conqueror Crest, this is really situational. I'll put it over here. I think like Academy and Ambusher you can more easily play around. You see Conqueror, you don't have a Conqueror spot, there's no fucking shot you can pivot and play into this, right? Maybe Ambusher is also here, but I think Ambusher is a little bit better because you can still play around Echo without having to like stack up stuff earlier. Conqueror, you need to be committing to Conqueror on 2-1 or else you're not going to work out. Contested, did they get rid of this? I haven't seen it in forever. Is this thing disabled? This used to be Giga broken. Contested is like S tier, but I haven't seen it in forever, so I don't know. I think it got disabled. Cooking pot, I think it's S tier. Basically, like any line that uses a pot, this just gives you so much HP. Really good with Sorks, really good with Ambushers. It enables like Twitch Bruiser. You can just get a bunch of HP on a Bruiser unit. You can play Sentinels and just have a bunch of HP with like a Renata comp. Visionary with a Renata comp. It's like, there's so many reroll lines and so many 4-cost comps that need tankiness, and this just not only gives them the ability to make the board that you want because you get the frying pan, but it also like makes them tankier as well. Like, hello? Balance. Vlad Augment I think is, I don't know if it's 8. It's very situational. It's hard to hit. It's really hard to hit this Vladimir unit. I don't know. Too many Sork players. I think it's B tier. But maybe if there's not a lot of Sork players, it's A tier. Crown Guarded, just average augment, take it, get your items. If Academy item is Crown Guard, it works out really well. Crown's Will, C tier, this is just a bailout, it gives you nothing. A Rod, 10 ability power, 10 armor. Yeah, like fucking useless. Actually useless. You only take this if you're so desperate for a Rod. It's just not an augment. It's like a component. It's like, it really doesn't give you anything. Domination, I would say B tier. I've seen people take Domination and play Dominators. It actually does pop off a little bit. I'm down to put in B tier, even though Dominators are trash. Dominator Crest, I think that's C tier. I wouldn't take it if I had to. Dragon Spirit, I think, is that still in the game? I'm pretty sure. B tier, really strong. Dual Q. This is like kind of like a bailout, but it's 2 5-cost gems and 2 copies of a random component. So you still get 2 components and 10 gold. So I think it's somewhere between B tier and C tier. I would put in B tier. I think it gives you enough. Epoch and Epoch Plus. I think Epoch Plus is a little bit better. I would put both of these in A tier. I don't think they're S tier because the econ augment that I think of when I see S tier is Slammin, which we'll get to when we get there. Experiment Crest, I think is a solid A tier. I think you see an Experiment Crest early, and often you can just win streak with it because of how much value it gives to your board. This isn't an augment that's going to help you to get like a first or a second, but it's like a pretty reliable top 4 because you're just so far ahead for most of the early game, especially if you have a spot for it. I think it also gives an Urgot, so if you're playing Urgot reroll, you can just play the 5 experiment variation or 3 experiment variation with Urgot. It's fine. I think it's great. Enforcer Crest is also A tier, just really high cap, so we're going to put it up there. Family Crest I'll put in B tier. I think that maybe it's C tier. It's somewhere between here and here. I think it's a little bit better than some of these ones, right? These ones you usually only take in certain situations. Maybe Family Crest is there actually. I only take it in certain situations. Same with Firelight. I think if you get it offered to you, unless you're playing Zeri reroll, it's not that good. And even if you're playing Zeri reroll, I think there's other options. But you know, if you're playing Zeri reroll, it's like somewhere up here, right? Same thing applies, right? Remember, this is A4 fun. This is mostly for fun. Every unit can have use. All these augments could be situationally the most broken thing ever, right? You might see another anomaly and you're playing Renata reroll and then you have 2 Giga Tanks because of another anomaly, but I put it in D tier. Sucks. I don't think this does anything. This black magic thing, I'm putting in C tier. I wouldn't really take it. Forward thinking, S tier. If you can take forward thinking, you almost always take it. It gives you so much gold. Now, the buff that they made to it, where it cashes out on 4-2, actually makes it significantly more viable because you actually spike with everybody else. Before, forward thinking cashed out on 4-3, and that was massively a problem. And I said during the patch review, I think forward thinking is going to be broken. The consensus is in. Everybody thinks it's broken. So if you're not taking it, I don't know what to tell you. Everybody thinks it's broken. Fractured crystals, I think it's like somewhere like here. It's the same as like adrenaline burst, same as these ones, right? All of these are pretty reliable if you're playing around the comps, right? It gives you the resources. Does Firelight give you a scar? No. Aerial warfare does though. Yeah, that's the main difference, right? Like, let's say you see Firelight Crest. I know this is only specifically good on Zeri, and you might say, how can you take aerial warfare but you won't take Firelight Crest? And it's like, because aerial warfare, if you see this augment, it gives you both a Scar and a Zeri. It immediately gives you Firelight. It immediately starts out your game. It puts you in a good spot from the start of the game. You see aerial warfare at the start of the game, you can click it, and you're already in a good spot to play the comp. You see Firelight emblem on the beginning of the game, what is gonna happen to you? Nothing. You're fucking 8th. You know what I mean? It's bad. Glass Cannon, A tier. Really strong combat. Same as the silver one. Gloves off, A tier. This one's giga broken. You should almost always click it if you can. Obviously, you need a good spot for it, but, you know, we'll see what it is. Gold for dummies, I think it's like A tier. I kind of like it. It gives a lot of gold. It gives you some value late game when you don't need the gold anymore. It's somewhere between here and here. I would just put in A tier. Golemify, I think, is also A. Oop, where did my Golemify go? Oh, it went over here. I think Golemify is A tier. Really broken. Really strong. If you're able to click it, you should almost always, not almost always, but if you're able to click it, you should click it. It just gives you so much value for what it is, and there's a lot of comps that work really well with it, either a full sentinel comp or some reroll comps, but mostly it's like an enabler for like stall comps that need really heavy front line, except like Twitch. It enables Twitch to be played and makes it cap very high. Health is wealth, I think, is A tier. I usually click this. It just gives you Omnivamp, and then it also gives you some extra gold, so it's pretty good value for what it is. Heavily Smash, I think, is B tier. Unless you're playing like a full bruiser comp, you often don't have to really worry about it. Heroic Grab Bag is kind of like a bailout. I don't like this. I usually put in C tier. Compared to the silver version is silver version, so you're not losing out on too much. But if your augment is just get 2 duplicators and a little bit of gold, and somebody else has, like, you know, built different, or like epoch, or like stuff that actually has value, maybe health is wealth is a little bit lower. I'll put health is wealth in B tier. I think health is wealth is B tier, but you know what I mean. It's not that good. It just isn't. High voltage, I think, is also B tier, unless you really need shred and sunder. There's some high voltage specific comps where you like put 3 sparks on 1 unit and then it deletes the backline and stuff, like some cheesy shit, but I don't believe in cheesy shit. Inspiring Epitaph, A tier, really strong combat. You can often just take it and it works with almost any board. Investment strategy, I think investment strategy is definitely like A tier. It's giga broken if you're playing around a reroll that uses sentinels like Renata or even Tristana or anybody that can really work with it. But this is like a reroll specific thing. If you're playing reroll, it just works really well, especially if you're in a high econ portal. So I think it's worth its value. Item collector, I think, is B tier. Pretty generic, pretty strong. Law enforcement, I think, is B tier. This is really good if you have a really good enforcer spot. If you don't have a good enforcer spot, this does absolutely nothing, because the attack damage is very little, but the gold conversion is really high, especially if you hit 6 enforcer early. Little buddies, I think, is A tier. Yeah, let's put in A tier. I think it's really strong. Long distance pals, I think, is B tier. Very rarely does it work. Maybe with like Sorks, it's pretty good. But a lot of times, like, you're not able to like spread it forces your positioning a little bit, which is kind of awkward. So it doesn't work really nicely with the current meta. Loot explosion, I think, is, honestly, I think loot explosion is like A tier, but I might be wrong. So I'm just gonna put in B tier. Unsure. Mesa's Will. Guinness sparring gloves. Oh, I really like Mesa's Will. I like to put in A tier, because I feel like it gives a lot, right? The 8% attack speed and 20% crit chance just feels like a lot of crit and a lot of attack speed. So I usually incline myself to take in this, but I'm unsure if it's like actually A tier or not. But, you know, somewhere here or here. Let's put in B tier just to be safe, right? Let's put in B tier. Like, all the generic ones are in B tier. These ones are like the giga strong ones, and then the S tiers are like the holy shit, like this is just really good, like I should always consider it type of tier. Malicious monetization, I don't like this one that much. I think it's like a C tier. Like, it's kind of like a bailout, kind of. Like, very rarely does it actually pay out really well. Mana flow, I think, is A tier for sure. Mana flow is just so good, gives so much mana. Mentorship, I think, is A tier for sure. Moonlight, is it S tier? Okay, so Moonlight is really good with Sorks and certain comps, but mostly Sorks. Now, the reason it's really good with Sorks is that you just can convert this into a Zyra carry game so easily. Zyra 3 fucks with 6 Sorks. So there's so many times where I'm playing Sorks, I see Moonlight, I click it, and it saves my game. I don't even have to roll for Zoe. I'm just stable, and you just fast 9, and then you hit LeBlanc, and you win out. It's actually fucking broken. But I'll put in A tier because it's only good with Sorks, I think. No Scout, No Pivot is S tier. If you're ever in a spot where you can take No Scout, No Pivot, this shit is fucking broken. The amount of HP that it gives your units, like you take No Scout, No Pivot with any Sentinel frontline reroll comp, you basically guaranteed went 1 or at worst 2 if somebody hits like fucking 10 Enforcer, maybe you go second. You know what I mean? This is broken. If you're not playing this, if you're not, like No Scout, No Pivot, that's risky. No. Like, you play it, you just have to play it with a proper comp. So if you don't have an opener where you can actually play No Scout, No Pivot, then you run into problems. But if you have any sort of reroll, like anything that looks like it can be a rerollable unit, and you can play them on your board and just send it, you just send it. It's a reroll meta as well, in my opinion. So it's just fucking giga. Okay, next. Holy shit, this is gonna take forever. Noble Sacrifice. I don't know. I think this is C tier. I almost never take this. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I think it's very situational. It almost never really works that well. Because if you're playing it with Sentinels, then it works with Sentinels. But other than that, it's like, eh. Not Today, I think, is B tier. It works sometimes. Nox and Guillotine, I think, is B tier. If you're playing Noxtons, it's really good. One for All, I think, is A tier. It's just really strong for what it is. Overheal, there's many comps. Any comp that has, like, multiple, like, stacking, like, Gwinsu stuff, it's really strong. Like, this is really good with Twitch. It's really good with, like, I don't know, so many things. Paint the Town Blue also is really good if you're playing Rebels, right? These ones are like a little bit different than the B tier ones, because the B tier ones are like situational and some of the comps are really awkward. If you see something like Paint the Town Blue, you can just commit towards Rebels. If you see something like Overheal, it works with so many comps and it's really broken on certain things. Like Overheal Zeri is really busted. I don't know, I think it's A tier. Like, it's like a step above everything else. Pairs of Fours. This one's a little awkward to play around. I'll put in B tier because of that. Pandora's, I think, is C tier. I just don't think, unless you really need a bailout, this is not very useful, and it's a waste of a gold augment a lot of the time. Patient Study, I think, is a B tier. Just really good econ, or like, around the same area as that. I think Piercing Lotus, I love it. A tier. So much value for it. Pilfer, I think, is B tier. Just a solid econ generation. Pit Fighter Emblem, C tier. Maybe even D tier. But there's some cases where it's really broken, so I'm down for that. Portable Forge, I think, is B tier, right? If you're playing around a comp that needs the artifacts, it works out really nicely. If not, it's a little bit awkward. Powered Shields, I think, is S tier. Almost always take this. It doesn't matter if you're playing around a comp that has a lot of shielding. This is just really broken, really strong. I almost always click it. Prize Fighter, it's situational, but it gives a lot of resources. I think it's B tier. Pumping Up is... I don't know if it's S tier or A tier. I'll put in A tier. Pyromaniac, I think, is solid B tier. Quick Striker Emblem, I think, is C tier. Raining Gold, I think, is a solid A tier. It just gives a lot of gold. It's like your generic one. Raining Gold Plus, we'll put it in the same spot. I think Raining Gold Plus is better than Raining Gold, but it is what it is. Rebel Emblem, we'll put it with all the other emblems in B tier. Just pretty good. Reinforcement is kind of like a bailout. But it gives you a lot of gold and it really stabilizes you hard. So I would put in B tier. It's like one of the best bailout augments you can hit. Rocket Collection, I think, is B tier. Replication, I think, is C tier. I think Replication just sucks sometimes. Like, if you don't hit a good item, you have like a 3 out of 8 chance of hitting, and like a lot of times you're not really like playing towards like more than 1 or 2 things. Rocket Collection Plus, we'll put here. Salvage Bin. I like Salvage Bin a lot, but I'll put in B tier. I think Salvage Bin doesn't give you a lot of resources, but it does give you the ability to play really flexibly, so I'm pretty happy with it. Sated Spellweaver. I don't know where this goes. We'll put in B tier. Scapegoat. I'll put in B tier as well. Scavenger. I don't know how broken this is, so I'm just going to put in B tier, but it might be A tier. I haven't had enough experience playing with it. Scoreboard Scrapper, I think, is A tier. I think that if you have a spot to play it, it's like an instant win type of augment, so it works out really well with a lot of stuff. Scrap Emblem, I think, is B tier. Sentinel Emblem, I think, is B tier. These are like, you take them in certain spots just to like cap out your board. But overall, like a lot of times emblems are stronger if you don't have to take them through an augment. You just get them offered in like a loot sub situation. But if you're playing around the comp, you have to actually consider whether or not you take it. It's like it's okay sometimes. Shield Bash I think is B tier. I don't think it's as bad in C tier. Shop Glitch I think is really strong, so I'm gonna put in A tier. I actually think this is like broken, but maybe that's just me. It could be a B tier. Slamming and Slamming Plus, these are S tier. All you have to do is put your items on your units. You know what you should be doing in TFT to save HP? Putting items on units. There's literally no downside to these. It's insane amount of value. They're pretty much like 2 gold per round for free, and all you have to do is just like make your items. It's like the most instant click augment I've ever seen in my life. Like, I don't know what to tell you guys. It's so ridiculously good, right? It's just so good, so flexible, so many options. Sniper Emblem I think is C tier. Sniper's Nest though I think is B tier. I think it actually works out really nicely in certain situations. Sork Emblem I think is A tier, just because of how strong Sorks is. Spear's Will I think is A tier. It gives you a lot of value. The 10% attack damage, 10% starting mana is actually a pretty good take. The 10 mana starting actually helps your units to cast a lot earlier, which actually can give you the upper hand in a lot of fights, I find. So I actually prefer this as opposed to some of the other item ones. Spirit Link I think is pretty good in certain situations, but we'll put in B tier because it's obviously very situational. Spoils of War I think is B tier as well. Starry Night is... I don't know if I should put in S tier, but I'll probably put in S tier just because of the current meta of the game. Right? If you're playing around a reroll, they're just so broken because of how many rerolls are really good. But Superstars should be A tier in my opinion. Similar to the silver one. Support Cash I think is pretty strong. I'm going to put this in A tier. I think out of combats you can never really go wrong by just taking a support item. I think it's just really strong. Teaming Up I think is also like because it's a random support item, I'll just put in B tier. Because often, like, I don't know, sometimes this is like bailout and it just doesn't work out very well. Mutation Survives I think is really broken if you have a spot for it, but it's really hard to have a spot for this. I don't know, I'll put in A tier. I think like the stuff in A tier, maybe it's just B tier. I'll put in B tier, it's very specific. Thorn Plated is broken. This goes in A tier for sure. Just always take that if you can. Tomb Raider I think is really scary to take, so it's usually like a C tier unless you have a really good spot for it. Top of the Scrap Heap does nothing. I'm going to put in C tier. Maybe it's okay with scrap. I don't know. It's hard to say. I really don't think it's that useful. We'll put in B tier though. Tower Defense I think is A tier. You just get an emblem that does work for you. It's great. Training Arc I think is C tier. Trade Sector I think is B tier. Trait Tracker has win condition, so we'll put in B tier, but you have to have a specific spot for it. A lot of times you're playing it into scrap. Betrayal, A tier. Martial Law, A tier. Menaces, I think is B tier. Just Reunion is S tier. Sisters. I think Sisters is B tier. And then Unlikely Duo is A tier. I'm just trying to say like what I think in terms of the power. Honestly, Martial Law, S tier, I think, as well. Wait, where did I put the other one? Oh, Betrayal's in A tier, yeah. I think these two are just giga broken, S tier. Trifecta. B tier if you have a spot for it, it's really good. Too Much Value. I think it's really broken, A tier. I think this is with certain reroll comps, it's just insanely broken. It could even be S tier, who knows? But you know, Two Trick, that's a good opener. Just have power to play across. Unleash the Beast, I think is like this enables like the Giga Urgot line, but I think I'll just put in A tier because obviously it's not like game winning, and sometimes you can even bot 4 if you don't have a spot for it and you push it. So like, you know, it's not perfect. Vampiric, I honestly don't think this is good. I'm gonna put in C tier. I almost never take this. Like, it just doesn't feel like it's valuable. Visionary Emblem, A tier. It enables a lot. Void Caller, I think is A tier. It enables a lot as well. Both those lines are insanely strong. Wandering Trainer, B tier for sure. Just like if you hit, you hit. If you don't, you don't. Warpath, I think is C tier. So many times I see people take this and they don't cash out. It's very situational. Of course, if you take it and you win out, you're good to go. Watcher Emblem, I think is C tier as well. Welcome to the Playground, I think is B tier. It actually can enable family reroll and cap really high. What doesn't kill you, I think, is A tier. This is one of the best econ generations in the game. You just have to lose streak early. Why not both? I haven't seen this in forever. I'll put in B tier. Worth the wait, I think, is A tier. I think it's A tier, yeah. Because you can use this as econ generation anyways. Anyway, so that's the those are the gold augments. Oh, sorry, War for the Undercity. I think it's B tier. If you have a spot for it, I think this actually can enable Chem Baron even in the current meta. Alright, so that's how I kind of arrange it. Of course, there could be like seep over from one to the other. Everything is situationally broken, right? You can win the game off of Warpath and go instant first, but I put in C tier. There's things in S tier that you can click and you instantly go bot for. This is not to say these are the ones that you should always click and this is how you play at the game. It's like these are the ones that are a lot less conditional, or the conditions for them make it so that you have a really good chance of winning. These are the ones that are similar to that. B tier, it's like it's very spot dependent, so it could be good, could be weak, or it could be grief, it could be not grief. And then obviously C tier are ones that I typically avoid unless I really want them, right? There's certain situations where they'll be really strong, like Tomb Raider or Training Arc or Warpath or Malicious Monetization, but typically I'm going to be looking at the other augments first. I'll probably take the other augments in my play. Now, Prismatics! Finally, we've reached the Prismatic augments. Let's go through them all. So, holy shit, this is going to take forever. But there's not that many Prismatics, which is going to be pretty good. A Change of Fate. So this is the one where you get a Mel. I think this is B tier. I think that very situationally it's strong, but it's not often very good. Academy Emblem, I think, is also B tier. It's better when it's like a gold augment. And same with Ambusher. But Ambusher gives you a Hand of Justice, so maybe it's A tier, but I'm down to put it there. Exalted Adventure, I think, is A tier. If you can actually get the cash out, is really strong. Anger Issues is pretty bad. I think it's C tier unless you're playing Zeri. Pretty much it's only good with one comp. So that's really bad with a Prismatic, because with Prismatics, a lot of times people are going to spike really hard. This is an instant reroll unless you see Zeri. Like, you always roll this augment. It's literally dog shit on almost everybody. I understand there are specific situations where it might be strong. I'm telling you now, it is not all. Like, there is almost no reason to take this. It's so bad sometimes. I think Artifactor is no longer in the game, so I'm not going to rank it. Artillerist, I think, is C tier as well. At What Cost, I think, is like B tier. I don't really like it that much. Belt Overflow, I think, is B tier. Birthday Present, I think, is A tier. They got buffs to Birthday Present, so now it's a lot more easily to play around because you get 2 gold every time you level up. Big problem with Birthday Present, you fizzle out, and when you try and push the tempo, it often makes things really awkward. Birthday Present also, when you're trying to play it, you always want to make it to level 9 to get your 2-star 5 cost. The thing that's really good about Birthday Present is that with the extra 2 gold, you don't grief your econ too bad, and you don't have to roll on level 9 in order to hit your 5 cost. So a lot of times, if you could just have if you can set yourself up for a level 8 roll down, a lot of times if you can play ahead from Birthday Present, which often you only take this if you're in a high econ playing ahead spot, you can make it to 9, just flash yourself to level 9. You don't have to have gold to roll on level 9, and then you just have to be playing a board where you can just slot in the 5 cost. So, you know, it's a little bit situational, but I think it's A tier for sure. Automata, C tier, maybe even D tier, because it's a Prismatic. Does this give, like, 2 things? It only gives a Nocturne. Black Rose, I think, is not that good because it's like, Black Rose Prismatic, you're giving up a Prismatic for Black Rose Emblem is not as good unless you're, like, playing 7 Black Rose. So I put in B tier. That's the main thing, right? If you're giving up Prismatic Augment, you have to understand people are going to have something like Bronze for Life. They're going to have, like, some giga strong, like, Bronze for Life is A tier for sure. It's just really strong. It gives a bunch of durability. If you can play around it, it's broken, but it's just situational. But for a Prismatic, it's insane. Something like Blazing Soul is S tier. It just gives you so much attack power. A Black Rose Emblem is not good if you like, compared to, like, Blazing Soul. You know what I mean? That's what I mean. So, like, you know, obviously a Black Rose Emblem can spike your board and stabilize your board, but it's not that good. That's why it's in B tier, even if it's like a meta thing. Blinding Speed, I don't really like it that much. This is like, you just take it if you really have to. Bruiser Emblem, C tier. Build a Bud, I think, is B tier. You can hit or you don't. Bulky Buddies, I think, is S tier, one of the best augments in the game. Buried Treasure, I think, is A tier. A lot of times you can fix your items as well. Really good with Scrap. It gives you some enablers, but even if not, it's like, maybe it's B tier. We'll see. Calculated Enhancement, I don't like this one that much. 40 attack damage and 50 ability power. There's actually very few units that can use both of these. Like, the units that I think of that can use both of these usually have the stats given to them anyway, something like Rebel. So I'll put in, like, A tier because it's just a combat, so it's pretty strong. Maybe it's even B tier. I'm down to put in B tier. You know what? Calculate Enhancement, B tier. Buried Treasures, B tier. I think this is fair. Call to Chaos, I think is just a bailout, so B for bailout. Caretaker's Chosen, I think is pretty good. Because you get a Radiant item, Anvil, and you get a bunch of components. 4, 6. I think it's a lot of resources. I'm not sure though. I'll put in B tier because I'm unsure. I don't think it's that strong. Cameron got removed. Conqueror Crown is very situational. I think it's pretty good. I'm going to put it in B tier, even though Conquerors aren't that strong. Conqueror Crown early is really good because it also gives you a Last Whisper. It's just a really good item because you just get your stuff. Coronation, A tier, for sure. Dark Alley Dealings. Is this still in the game? I don't know if it's still in the game. I'll put it in B tier. Dominator, C tier. Dual Purpose, I think, is A tier. Enforcer, I think, is A tier. Enforcer spikes your board by so much that it's basically the power of this Prismatic. That's why I consider it A tier. Because if you can actually hit 8 Enforcer with this, it's actually very powerful. Like, it's one of the best things. Unexpected Unexpectedness, I hate this augment. I'm putting it in C tier. This fucking shit, it never rolls anything good for me. I guarantee you. Experiment Emblem, I think, is B tier. Family Crown, I think, is C tier. Final Polish, I think, is A tier. It's just a really good way to cap out your board. Firelight, I think, is like, it's probably D tier. I wouldn't really, like, you know, it's very rare that I'm taking that. Flexible, I think, is A tier. You just get so many emblems off of it. Flurry of Blows, I think, is A tier. Ghost of Friends Past, I think, it got nerfed and it's never been the same. Honestly, I think it's C tier. I usually never consider this. Glorious Evolution, I think, is C tier. Going Long, I think, is A tier. Greater Moonlight, I think, has really good win conditions. I think is A tier. The Prismatics are harder to rank because there's so much fewer of them. Like, Greater Moonlight is definitely better than any of the. I'll just put in B tier, actually. I've convinced myself. Hall of Mirrors. All champions in the front row become clones of the champ. This isn't in the game anymore. Hard Commit. I think Hard Commit is okay. I'll put in B tier because sometimes you get absolutely screwed with it. Hedge Fund, I think, is C tier. You basically have to commit to a lose streak, and a lot of times you have too much gold, and if you low roll with it, you just die. I'm the Carry Now, I think, is B tier. Just get a frontline unit. Immovable Object, I think, is A tier, just really strong. Invested and Invested Plus, these are like bailouts. I'll put them in B tier. I don't think they're particularly strong. They're more like bailouts. Investment Strategy, I think, is broken with certain comms, so we'll put it there. Level Up, I think, is like, of the other ones, I kind of like it less than the other ones, so I'll put it in B tier. Living Forge, like, of the other, like, level up ones. Living Forge is still in the game for sure. And this one, I think, is B tier. You take it if you have a spot where you're playing around Orn artifacts, like maybe you're playing Nocturne reroll. Lucky Gloves is like a solid B tier. This is like you just take it for a bailout. Max Cap, I think, is pretty strong. If you're playing around reroll, it's basically like the way that you guarantee your top 4. But I'll put in B tier because I don't think it's that good unless you're playing reroll. And even then, you're probably better off with other stuff. 1 buff, 2 buff, I think, is B tier. Pandora's Items, I think, is C tier. I wouldn't necessarily want to take it ever. Freaky Friday, I think, is like, oh god, Freaky Friday is so hard to rank. I'll put it in C tier. Piercing Lotus, I think, is A tier. Pit Fighter, I think, is D tier. Prismatic Pipeline, I think, is A tier. Prismatic Ticket, I think, is B tier. Pumping Up, I think, is A tier. Quality over Quantity, I think, is A tier. Just really strong combat. The reason I'm putting some of these in C tier or A tier or B tier, by the way, is just because C tier, it's like, okay, when I say like B tier, it's like it's specific spots, or it's really strong, or it's like a win condition in a specific spot. C tier is the same thing, except it's just less spots that these are win conditions for. And D tier is like, these are very rarely win conditions. So it's like, dedicating a Prismatic for it is pretty bad. Oh, my mouse died. And then like A tier is kind of like, you know, A tier is like, these are like very generic, or they're a comp that you're normally going to be trying to play around anyways, which is pretty good. There we go. My mouse is back. And then S tier is just like, you just take these always. Like, they're just so fucking strong. And like, you know, you almost always take it. Quick Striker, I think, is D tier. Radiant Refractor, I think, is like, honestly, I think it's C tier. I hate taking this. Maybe it's B tier. I don't know. I don't like it that much. Radiant Relics, I think, is C tier, though. Sometimes you just don't hit with this thing. It's absolutely abysmal. Rebel Emblem, I think, is B tier. One of the better ones to take. Roll the Dice. I think it's B tier. It just gives you a lot of tempo early game. Scrap, B tier. Sentinel, I think is, honestly, I think it might be C tier, but I'll put it in B tier because I think Sentinels are really strong to play around. Trimmer Scale Essence, I think it's B tier. Because usually it's just awkward to play around, and so is Shopping Spree. Snipers is C tier for sure. Oh no, actually Snipers is D tier. Fuck that. Sork Emblem is A tier. Just because it's similar to like Enforcer, it spikes your board really hard and it helps you to stabilize a lot earlier. It also gives you Adaptive Helm, which is nice to play around. Spoils of War, I think is, honestly, it's so situational. We'll put it in B tier. Sponging, I think is B tier, but I rarely take it, so it might be C tier, but I'll put it in B tier to be nice. Subscription service, I think, is B tier. It's situationally really strong if you're playing a comp that requires a lot of forward cost. You get them early. Sword Overflow, I think, is B tier. Tactician's Kitchen, honestly, I think is S tier, but maybe I'm wrong, so I'll put it in A tier. But it's somewhere here or here. It gives you a fawn and a random emblem, so it just gives you so much early game tempo, and often you can just play around that and build your board and just be really strong. Because the biggest problem with like hard forcing towards a certain comp is that if your spot is bad and then you have to roll for the units, you find yourself in a really bad spot later. But having the extra fawn, it's just now that they nerfed it, so it's after 3-player combats. But before the after 3-player combats, it was S tier, so that's why I just downgraded to A tier to me. Golden Egg, I think, is a grief, C tier. Tiniest Titans, I think, very situational. He has a lot of gold, but honestly, I think it's C tier. Most times when people take Tiniest Titans, you're just behind by so much. It's mostly an econ augment for gold, but it very rarely does it pay out enough for you to stabilize your board, because the 2 HP doesn't matter that much. Geniuses, I think, is A tier. I think it's really strong. And Menaces, I think, is B tier, or this one is B tier with this Vander. Trifecta, I think, is B tier. It can work out really well in some comps. Upward Mobility, I think, is A tier. It's just a really good leveling and econ augment. Tomb Raider, I think, is like eh. Visionary Emblem, I think, is good, but is it as good as the other ones? Maybe. I'll put it in A tier. Void Swarm, I think it's pretty strong, but I think it goes in B tier. It's just like situational. Wand Overflow, it's like whatever. Wandering Trainer is like whatever. Watcher Emblem is bad. What You Really Are, I think, is like eh. And then Worth the Wait 2, I think, is maybe A tier. You get a free 3-star 2 cost. I think this is pretty good like this. I'm trying to think if there's any of these that I want to put up one. It's probably I put up Prismatic Pipeline, Piercing Lotus, and this in S tier. I think all of these are S tier. The problem is a lot of these are very situational, right? Like Randuin's is broken in certain comps. The other stuffs are broken in certain comps. Where did my Randuin's go? Over here. Yeah, I think this is like my general ranking for Prismatics. A lot of these are situationally really strong. Like you can win the game off of Greater Moonlight. Honestly, I'm going to put Greater Moonlight in A tier because you can win the game off of it. Are there any more of these that you can win the game off of? Like Build-A-Bud, maybe? Like, none of these other ones are game-winning, right? If it's an A tier, it has to be, like, game-winning off of the Augment. That's the way I look at it, right? Especially with Prismatics. Like, are these game-winning off of the Augment? Yeah, like, a lot of these are game-winning off of the Augment. S tier are, like, giga-strong and giga-flexible and, like, insanely good for multiple comps. These ones are, like... Yeah, these are, like, game-winning off of the Augment, more or less, right? Yeah, I agree with my list. Alright, so that's the Prismatics. Alright, we're done. Like I said, it was just a brief little for fun. People have been asking me to do one of these. Like I said before, I don't think this is a very helpful resource, but it was something that was requested of me, and I respond to comments. So hopefully that was informative. If you actually want to have really good, informative takes on the Augment, then you can check it out on my Augment picking guide, because that one explains much more in depth how you should pick your augments, which will be more beneficial. Thank you for watching. Have a great day, and see ya. Bye bye.